Hi, I'm Bob Lofterthun, Interim Executive Director of the Northern Virginia Resource Center for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Persons. We were established in 1988. We're based in Fairfax, and our mission is to empower deaf and hard of hearing individuals and their families through education, advocacy, and community involvement. We're doing a series of programs focused on the hard of hearing and the deaf communities. And today, our program is focused on hard of hearing. And our program title is Where Did My Hearing Go? And today, our guest is Bonnie O'Leary, Outreach Program Manager of NVRC. Welcome, Bonnie.
Thank you, Bob.
I know you've been hard of hearing for over 20 years, and I was wondering if you could say a little bit of something about when you realized you had a hearing loss and what were some of the signs.
Well, my first clue was that it sounded like everybody was mumbling all of a sudden.
Right.
And I was having to have people repeat what they said to me. I was misunderstanding in conversations with my family and friends. I was getting things wrong on the telephone. So it was just like everything was indistinguishable. And I owned a recording studio at the time. Oh. And I was making people go deaf without really knowing what I was doing. But I misunderstood a client phone call. And they asked a question, I gave them the wrong answer. And my engineer called me at about 2 o'clock in the morning to say, why in the world would you tell them, you know, X, Y, Z, and realized I almost cost my own business several $1,000s. And at that point, I thought I had better do something about this. And in the end, I had to sell my studio. But sometimes it takes that one aha moment before you take that step to do something about it. And you have a hearing loss as well, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I've been wearing hearing aids now for a year. Okay. And for me, it was sort of a gradual realization that I was missing a lot of family conversation. I would attend business meetings and wouldn't quite pick up everything. Right. And I especially noticed it like in a business social situation where I was standing with a group of maybe 4 or 5 colleagues in a crowded room, and I realized I could hear maybe 40% of what was being said. So at that point, I realized I really needed to do something. So if someone's having these experiences, what's the first step for them?
Well, before they take that first step, I think we all need to understand that we're not alone. And depending on the sources of information that you trust, there are between 36 and 55 million Americans who have some degree of hearing loss. So it's not just us. We're part of a very big club. And when you realize that you aren't hearing well anymore, the first step really is to see your doctor, your ear, nose, and throat doctor. Maybe start with your primary care, because there are so many causes of hearing loss. In many cases, it's a question of just growing older and having the age-related hearing loss. But you can have a virus, you could have an illness, you could be having a reaction to certain new medications that you're taking.
Is that right?
You could have a tumor, less likely, I mean a brain tumor or an acoustic neuroma on the 8th cranial nerve. There are all these things that can be going on. So it's a good idea to get checked out first by your doctor. If you don't, and you decide to go straight to an audiologist, they will have you sign a waiver that says, I know I should have had a physical, but I have elected not to. And that way they, you know, they're kind of off the hook if they sell you hearing aids and there's another solution at hand.
So what you're saying is it's very important to see an ear, nose, and throat doctor first.
Yes, yes.
Okay, before seeing an audiologist. And with the ENT, do they perform an evaluation? Who does that?
Many of them do. Many of them also have audiologists as part of their practice.
Okay.
So the doctor's on this side of the reception and the audiologist's on that side of the reception. Right. So, you know, every practice is different, but some of them do.
And what happens during an evaluation?
An evaluation is one of those wonderfully non-invasive and painless things.
Oh, I like those. Right? Those are good.
They sit you in a soundproof booth, and you hear test tones, sort of like tuning fork on a piano, and you push the button or you raise your hand when you hear the tone. And then you get speech discrimination testing. That's very important because it shows the audiologist the point at which you can tell that somebody is speaking and the point at which you can understand what they're saying. And that's critical information for programming hearing aids. And then they do a bone conduction test. That sounds awful.
Okay. Right.
But they just take the headset and put it over the mastoid bone, and that will confirm whether or not you have a conductive or a sensory neural hearing loss. Then they do a tympanogram, and that tests the flexibility of the eardrum and the pressure inside in the middle ear. So it's quite comprehensive.
I do remember it was a very thorough examination,
Very thorough.
and it was painless. So that's always nice. That's always nice. So when we talk about different types of hearing loss, what do we mean, and how do we hear?
Well, there are basically 3 types of hearing loss. There's conductive.
Right.
And the conductive hearing loss refers to something blocking the signal getting to the brain. It's important to understand how we hear. Our outer ear picks up all the sounds of the world,
right,
and funnels all of that through the middle and the inner ear, and it ends up in the auditory cortex of the brain, and that is actually where we hear. Our ears simply provide the transportation of the sound signal to the brain. So when we talk about types of hearing loss, we have the conductive loss, which blocks the signal. That could be a big ball of earwax. It could be bony growths on the little stapes bone in the middle ear. It could be fluid built up behind the eardrum, a perforated eardrum. There are a variety of things. But conductive hearing loss is generally thought of as temporary because usually it can be helped with medical intervention.
I see.
People like me have a sensory neural hearing loss. I suspect that's what you have
as well, right.
the more common one. And that takes place in the cochlea along the auditory nerve. That is permanent. So at this point in time, there isn't anything they can do yet to bring our hearing back. And then some people have a combination of the two, both conductive and sensory neural.
Okay. Well, that's very good to know. And with the evaluation, how are the evaluation results? How are they recorded?
Well, when they do the hearing evaluation on you, the results are recorded on a graph called an audiogram. And we have a visual here of 2 side by side. If we look at the one on the left, you'll notice that there are numbers that go across the top. That refers to the pitch of the sound. It's sort of like keys on a piano, from low to high, and that's measured in hertz. The numbers that go down the left side refer to the volume, and they go soft to loud, and you can see all those loud sounds down at the bottom, the jackhammer, lawnmower, and all of that, measured in decibels.
Right.
But you will notice a banana-shaped form on the audiogram. That's called the speech banana. And in that form, you will see where the speech sounds are. So when our hearing is tested, the audiologist is looking to see where your hearing is in relation to speech in particular. That helps for programming the hearing aids. If you look at the audiogram on the right, and if that patient presented with the hearing loss, if you look at the slope going down, the higher the frequency, the longer the slope, that orange area would be very difficult, if not impossible, for that patient to hear.
I see.
Right, and so when we lose the consonant sounds, and this explains people mumbling, because consonants give language its meaning, and when consonants are compromised or distorted or disappear altogether, then it's very difficult to understand in conversation.
Yes, yes. And with the audiogram, it's very important to get a copy of that, right?
You have to,
bring it with
yes,
you.
The copy of the audiogram, it belongs to you. You certainly should get a copy.
And one of the things that you told me one time was that, and you displayed it visually, where there was some sentences, but the consonants were missing, and it really kind of gave a visual idea of how people hear. Because, you know, before I had a hearing aid, I could hear people, but I couldn't quite understand what they were saying. It wasn't so much volume as like there was pieces of information missing.
Right, clarity. We had a very distinguished surgeon give a program at NVRC some years back, Dr. Naparko, who very sadly has passed away. But he said that the majority of words in English begin and end in consonant sounds. So we listen and we speak in little sandwiches. And for people like me who have that, I have no consonant sounds left at all, the bread falls off. And what we're left with is listening to the middle of the word. A lot of the vowels are the heavier sounds. And so that makes it very, very challenging to have conversations.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about hearing aids?
Okay, so that is often the next step. We present with hearing loss and we're suddenly given a whole range of choices of hearing aids. Hearing aids come in 4 styles, basically. That doesn't have anything to do with what they do. Okay. That is what they look like. And the behind the ear, this is what I have, the behind the ear hearing aid.
Right, I see the graphic there.
Right, yeah, and you can see that. And it's fairly large. It holds all the bells and whistles, and I have a mold that goes into my ear to completely occlude it, which means no other sound gets in but what I'm getting through the microphone.
Right.
Then I believe that you have behind the ear also, but you have the open fit,
right,
which is slightly different. Your hearing aid goes behind your ear, and that's where your bells and whistles are. And then you have a little silicone dome that goes into your ear canal. So you get ambient sound as well as the sounds that you need to have amplified. And then there's the in-the-ear hearing aid. This is a very common, popular style of hearing aid that fills the whole bowl of the ear. And again, it's large enough to hold all the bells and whistles that we need.
Right.
And then they get a little bit smaller. You have the in the canal, where it's still partially visible. And then the little teeny tiny one, which is the completely in the canal, which is of course the one everybody wants because it's invisible. But the smaller they get, the less likely it is that you can fit some of the features in it that you need to have better hearing.
Right, right. And speaking of bells and whistles, mine, for instance, my hearing aid, and this is it here, this is the open kind.
Right, you've got that.
And mine has I elected to have an option called the Telecoil in that. And I'm wondering if you might tell us a little bit about Telecoils, Bluetooth, and some of the features of hearing aids that they could possibly have.
A lot of hearing aids today have Bluetooth, and many of them also have Telecoil. Bluetooth works like any other Bluetooth device. If you have a cell phone that has Bluetooth, or an iPad, or any other Bluetooth device, you simply activate your Bluetooth feature and your hearing aid communicates with that device. And I have known folks who wear a Bluetooth streamer around their neck, and they can put their cell phone on the passenger seat in the car and just go ahead and make a phone call without even touching their cell phone. It's really scary. And I can't use Bluetooth because my hearing loss is so profound that the signal isn't strong enough for me.
I see.
But I prefer the Telecoil, and the Telecoil is simply a little wire inside the hearing aid. You can't see it, and it interacts with an electromagnetic field. So you think about the meeting room that we have at NVRC.
Yes.
We have a big induction loop above the ceiling tiles. So when we have somebody do a presentation and they speak through the microphone, all of our visitors who wear hearing aids with Telecoils can simply push the button, activate their Telecoil feature. They can sit anywhere in our room, and the voice of the person speaking will be right in their ear. They don't need to be in the front row. They can be all the way in the back, off to the side. It doesn't matter. Also, if you're using the telephone, you activate your Telecoil feature, and it will cut out all sound except the voice of the person who is speaking to you.
Interesting.
So it's wonderful. I use mine with a TV. I have a wireless TV neck loop that I can use, so the voices of the actors or the newscasters come right to my ear. It's a fantastic dimension to a hearing aid. I wouldn't be without it.
And with the meeting room in NVRC, having that Telecoil up there, having the loop up there, is very helpful. Of course, our board meetings, it's very helpful. I just press a button and it goes right into my hearing aid. Staff meetings, even our staff meetings, because several of us are hard of hearing, and we use that during our staff meetings. And then also social events where you may have 40, 50, 60 people in a room, and you're in the back of the room and the speaker's in the front of the room. As long as they're speaking into the PA, then it goes right into your hearing aid. So it's a very useful tool. Well, can you tell us a little bit about, you know, how having a hearing loss can really impact someone's life?
Well, when we think about being able to hear, and it's especially true with folks who are late deafened, who could hear for most of their lives, or at least for the first 40, 45 years, and they lose their hearing, the impact that has is not only on them, but also their family, their friends, their co-workers, loved ones, anyone who has to be in a communication situation with them. Our hearing connects us to the world. You know, Helen Keller was asked many, many times, if you could have your vision or your hearing, what would you pick? And she always said, my hearing, because blindness separates us from things and our hearing separates us from people.
Interesting observation.
So when you can't relate and you can't connect, that can have an enormous impact on us. And also in relationships, or even in any communication event, Janet Prey, who was provost at Gallaudet University, she's retired now, but she did a lot of research and she came up with these parallel reactions that hearing and hard of hearing people experience. So let's say you were still hearing, and I'm hard of hearing, and we were trying to have a conversation. You might feel, or I would start out feeling very frustrated because I can't understand you. You will be frustrated because you can't make yourself understood. I might get angry that you're not trying hard enough. You might get angry that I'm not trying hard enough. And then I might just feel so guilty that I have to put you through this. You might feel guilty that I have to go through this. So what is the ultimate outcome? We both want to withdraw from the conversation. So when we are in any kind of a communication event, we need to be mindful of that. Often when we don't have our hearing, we tend to focus on ourselves and we forget that communication is a two-way street. And it's very easy for people who care about us to become impatient, to become irritated, to become exasperated, or even angry. And so it's a good opportunity to sit down and work out collaboratively how you're going to cope with that. But yes, hearing loss, and I see this in my outreach work for older people who are losing their hearing in their 70s and 80s, and they've been married 60 years. And one person is losing the hearing. This has an enormous impact on their relationship. So we have to work with them to see how they can maintain the status quo as best that they can. And talking about the withdrawal aspect, if you will, for myself, my personal experience, like going to these business receptions where you really want to network. I mean, that's one of the main purposes of going, is to network with people. And if you're in a room with 50, 60, 100 people, and you're meeting someone for the first time, and there may be 3 or 4 people there, and you can't hear anything, well, you know, after a while, what you do is you stop engaging, but at the same time, you realize, well, I can't do that. I have to network. I have to meet people. So that's an incentive, I think, to getting your hearing checked and doing something about it. And then you were mentioning also impact on loved ones and family. And with my family, as I was losing my hearing more and more, they'd get irritated. You know, they're used to me hearing their entire life, and now I can't quite hear them. They have to repeat themselves. If they're in another room, I can't hear them. So there was a certain amount of irritation. So once I got my hearing checked, I had my audiogram, I was diagnosed, then they understood, okay, well, there's a serious hearing issue here. And once I got my hearing aids,
then I started to still work with them, and sort of in that line, what are like some of the strategies, even once you get your hearing aid? Because I have to say, and you've pointed out this to me many times, is that hearing aids are not like glasses, right?
No, and it's important to know that, because if an audiologist, a lot of audiologists will want you to feel comfortable about getting hearing aids, so they'll say, think of it as glasses for the ears, and nothing could be further from the truth. So if you have nearsightedness or farsightedness, optics can give you 20/20 or better.
Right.
It's a different physics. The science of sound and hearing is its own thing. And while I wouldn't be without my hearing aids, they put me on the air, it's wonderful. I know that there are limitations. I know what they won't do well. I know what they'll be fabulous at. I know what they won't do at all. And that has a big impact on the success of our outcomes. You have to have realistic expectations.
I think that's absolutely
very, very
key.
Important.
Yes, that's absolutely key. I think that you have to have those expectations. I hear so much better than I did before, but I don't hear the same way I did when I was in my 30s or my 20s.
Right.
It's not the same quality of sound. It's very, very close, but it's not quite the same.
Right.
So even once you get your hearing aids, what are some of the strategies that you can use in various situations?
Well, one of the strategies that it's not so much a strategy as information that I give everybody that I care about. It's not just my hearing loss. I don't want to hear she can hear when she wants to. Okay, that's a very common accusation to us. She can hear when she wants to. My father has selective hearing loss. My grandmother has selective hearing loss. No, it isn't. They have to think about the 4 components of communication: speaker, listener, environment, message. Change one little thing about any one of those 4 components, and your outcome can be completely different.
Interesting.
So speaker, you know people that you can understand easily.
Right.
And you may turn around and talk to this person and not understand them at all. We all have different patterns of speech. Hearing aids won't overcome someone who has a heavy accent, for instance, or somebody who speaks very, very softly or has some kind of addiction issue. You can't push a button on a hearing aid and get that person to speak more clearly.
That's very true, and I just want to say that I find that with hearing loss, even though I have hearing aids, it's a little bit more difficult for me to understand people with accents.
Very hard.
Now, I know they don't have that heavy an accent, but it's just I can't hear it that well.
Right.
So one thing I do is I tell them, sorry, but I'm somewhat hard of hearing, because they can be sort of self-conscious about their accent. So I try to let them know, no, it's not really you, it's really me.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's very, very important. And you as the listener, and me as the listener, how are we doing?
Right.
Are we having a good day? Are we energetic? Do we feel fantastic? Do we have a headache? Are we tired? Are we just fatigued out? There's so much fatigue with hearing loss. And that will have an outcome, too. If you're not feeling great, you're not going to get it that well. And the environment is so important, because acoustics play a huge part in how well we do. So if you go, for instance, to a restaurant that has the high ceilings and the wood floors and glass windows all along the side, everything is bouncing and echoing off the walls, off the floor, off all the hard surfaces, and you've got multiple people speaking. To pick somebody's speech signal out of that noise is very, very difficult. We like a friendly acoustic environment.
Sure.
We like a smaller room, lower ceilings, carpets, drapes, whatever it takes to absorb the sound. But it's very difficult if you're in a hard place acoustically. So environment is key. And the message, what are we talking about? If we know the topic of the conversation, it improves our chances of speech reading by up to 50%.
I've noticed that.
Yes,
if I know what we're talking about, my comprehension is higher.
So strategies. Environmental strategies that we use, and I use these probably 2 or 3 times a week. If I can't do anything to change the environment I'm in, like turning off the TV or boosting the heat or making it lighter, I change environments. So I find another room to go to. So you're at a party at somebody's house, everybody's talking, you can't understand, can we go in the den? There's nobody in there.
Right.
Let's change environments. So we do that. In my family, the rule is if you need me, don't you talk from another room.
Right.
You come and find me. I find you if I need you. When I walk into the family room to watch television and I join my family, whoever has the remote control puts on the captions.
Right.
If I walk in while they're watching TV and all I need to do is ask a couple of questions and have a quick conversation, whoever has the remote puts on the mute button. That way there's no background noise, because background noise is tough for us. So we've worked out a lot of these solutions amongst ourselves. My daughter, even recently, she put me in my place almost, because she had something to tell me and I was facing her in the kitchen, and then I turned to finish what I was doing in the sink while she was still talking. And she stopped talking, and I noticed that, and I turned around, she said, I really wish you wouldn't do that, because it makes me feel like you're not interested in what I have to say. And so I thought, good for you.
Right.
She was very kind and gentle about it, but I wasn't even thinking. So I think of myself as a hearing person, and I did a hearing thing. I turned around while somebody else was speaking. So she called me on that. But it's important to face the person. Very difficult to understand someone whose back is turned. It's important to speak clearly, not so slowly that you exaggerate your words, just a nice, comfortable pace.
Right, natural pace.
Right, and if the person can't understand you, rephrase. Repeating may or may not work. So try to find some other vocabulary.
Right.
And being patient goes a very, very long way. You know, we can sense when people are getting irritated. Just be patient and, you know, work through it.
Right. And I have found personally these strategies that you're laying out very helpful at home. I follow them at home. I ask people not to talk to me from another room.
Right.
We watch TV with captions. And actually, even my family, and they're all hearing, you pick up a little bit more dialogue in the movies when you have captions on. So it's worked out really well. It's a bit of a transition, and it's a teamwork, especially with your family and your colleagues. And fortunately at NVRC, we're very attuned to this. So it's a very cooperative environment. But if you are the only hard of hearing person in a work environment, that can be challenging. And so you need to politely, diplomatically just kind of inform people. Right,
but you have to be sure that they have all of the, you know, the access that they need.
Yes.
You need to be sure that they have, you would offer them, where would you like to sit in the meeting? They usually need line of sight. They might need a pocket talker. They might need cart. That's a whole other situation. But
and another show.
But
we'll have to do a couple of more shows and touch on those events. Well, this has been, at least for me, very educational and informative.
Good.
And I thank you very much, Bonnie. And you're doing great work going out into the communities and meeting with groups. And this is very important work.
Yeah.
And I hope that everyone here has also benefited from this information. And if you need more information, please contact us. Our website, first of all, is nvrc.org. And there's information up there on the screen with our email, info@nvrc.org. And again, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you.